previous video, we looked at how to read data into an array from a text file, and we populated a text box with the data from that text file by using a for each loop. What we want to do in this video, before we populate that text box, we want to sort the array so that these are alphabetical. So let's go back to our code. In that previous lesson, we created our array called clients and set the number of elements to 0. And then we read our data. We read it twice. We read it once just to figure out how many elements there were. We resized our array, closed the file, reopened it, and then read the data into that array. I mentioned there was a second way to do it. And while this is my preferred method, I'll show you the other way. So I'm going to comment out that second reading of the array. And we're reading our data in one line at a time, placing it into temp, incrementing the number of elements from 0. And what I'm going to do then is simply resize my array each time. By passing array.resize, a reference to my client's array, and changing the length to num elements. And then we can use that line we did before of client's next element. And instead of next element, we're going to take num elements, and I'm going to subtract 1. And the reason being is the number of elements is always one more than the last element. And then rather than reading read line of that, we've already read that line in. We're just going to set it equal to temp. So we do it in one loop here rather than 2 loops. And that might seem more efficient, but the problem is this resizing array takes some effort on the part of the computer. And so I think this is a less efficient way of doing it, or takes longer for it to do this, especially with the more data you have, the longer it would take. I prefer the methodology I showed you earlier of reading the array once, finding out how many elements there are, resizing the array, closing the array, reopening it, and then reading that array back into the different elements of our array. But just to show you this works, I'm going to save this and run it. We'll get our data. And there is the same result. Okay, so let's sort that data before we put it into our database. Now, C# has a really nice way, an easy way of sorting an array, and that is there is a sort method built into the array class. So we can say array.sort, and we can simply give it the name of our array. We want to sort clients. Now, this works in what we call a one-dimensional array. In a few lessons, we'll look at multi-dimensional arrays. The sort does not work for multi-dimensional arrays. But to show you that this works in this case, let me just run this. We'll get our data. And there is our list alphabetized. Next, we need to write the code that will allow us to view one record at a time and to be able to navigate through the records. But before I do that, I want to show you another way to sort this. Let's assume that you're working in another language, and maybe that language doesn't have the array.sort option or method, or we want to be able to later do a multi-dimensional array. So I'm going to comment this out and show you another way to sort this. There's several different algorithms for sorting data, and the simplest one, which works on a small amount of data, doesn't work on a large amount of data, is the bubble sort. And the bubble sort is 2 nested for loops that looks at each data item and raises the lesser data item to the top, or you could do reverse and put it in reverse order and have the larger data item at the top. So here's how we're going to do this. We're going to say for int I equals 0. So we're going to start with element 0 in our array. I is going to be less than our array size. I'm going to do -2 because I'm not going to compare the very last element array. I'm going to do the second to last element array. So we're going to end this outer loop. Each time through, we're going to increment our loop. Then I'm going to do an inner loop, a nested loop. And here we'll use the counter j. And j is going to equal I plus 1. And it's going to go as long as j is less than clients dot length. And we'll increment j. The reason we're doing I plus 1 here is I want to look at each element after I. After the first time we go through I, the lowest value is going to be at the top. Second time, the second lowest value at the top. So each time through I only need to compare the elements that come after that value of I. And I want to read to the very end, so I'm getting the very last element being compared. So here's where we're going to do our comparison. If clients element j is less than clients element I, so C# is saying that it cannot apply the less than operator to operands of type string. So let's make this a little bit different. Let's say string.compare. So we use the compare method of the string class. And what I'm going to compare is j and I. And if that is less than 0, meaning that element j comes before element I, then we're going to swap. And the way we're going to swap is we're going to create a variable. It's going to be a string. And I'm just going to call it swap. And it's going to equal client element I, and then clients sub I is going to equal clients element j and clients sub j equals swap. So we're temporarily holding a value in a variable called swap, because at this point that value no longer exists when I change client sub I equals client sub j. I had to store that in swap first and then put that into client sub j. That should order our list alphabetically. I've commented out array.sorts. We'll assume we don't have access to that because that's the easy way. This is the harder way, and this bubble sort simply goes through each element, starting with the very first one, and compares it to all the elements after that. And then, as it finds values that are less than that top element, it swaps them and continues that comparison until the first time through loop I, we have the smallest value at the top. The second time through, we have the second smallest. Next time through, we have the third smallest. Let me run this. Again, we get the data. And there is our alphabetized list using the bubble sort rather than array.sort. So we've sorted our array. What we want to do is now make those other buttons work. And I'm going to do one more thing here, and that is I'm going to, once we got this sorted and we displayed everything in the text box, I'm going to take that LBL client name and set the text equal to clients sub 0. I'm going to create a class level variable up here at the top of an integer named current record. It's going to equal 0. And then I want that LBL now showing to say we're looking at record 0 of how many records there are. So it's going to say record. I'm going to concatenate current record dot toString. If I could simply, I know it's record 0, I could say record 0 of how many. I'm going to go ahead and do the toString here, so we can just use this again later, the same code. And we can count into that of, and I want to find the total records. And so that's going to be clients dot length dot toString. Let's run this again. We can get the data. And so now it's showing the first record here, and I'm showing record 0 of 14. Well, really, probably what I want is record 1 of 14. Our user doesn't really count with 0, the computer does. So let's show that it's 1 of 14, because it's actually the first record. So let's change current record then to current record plus 1, and take the toString of that. So again, we're going to run this. Get our data. And now it's showing record 1 of 14. Now what we're going to do is build a code these 4 buttons to finish out our application here. So we can go to the first record, the previous record, the next, and the last. So I'm going to double click on our first record button. I'm going to copy those 2 lines of code because we're currently in the first record. And what we want to do though is make sure that the current record equals 0. So that should take us to our first record. Let's go to the previous record. So here we're going to do this if current record is greater than 0. So if we're already in the first, we can't go to one previous to that. And again, I'm going to paste in the same things here. Here we're going to go to, I'm going to set current record. We're going to decrement it by 1, so current record minus minus. And then instead of looking at element 0, we want to simply go to current record. Let's do the next record. The next record is going to basically be the same thing with a few slight changes. If current record is less than the number of clients dot length minus 1. Again, current record is our index, so we want to do 1 less than the length. Here we want to increment current record. We'll show current record, and then we'll show our now showing text. And the very last one is go to the last record, and I'm going to copy my code from inside our if statement, because here all I want to do is say current record equals clients dot length minus 1, and then we'll set the name of the client to that record, and we'll show that we're looking at the last record of all of them. Let's test this. Oh, an error, and I'm missing a semicolon here on this last line. So I'm going to get my data. I'm going to go to the next record. So the next record works, cycling through. I'm going to go to the previous record. That cycles through. I can go to the last record. Robert Thomas is the last one. Go to the first one. We're back to Abigail Anderson. So those buttons all work. And that is the completion of our reading data into an array, sorting the array, and be able to cycle through the records of that array. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the C# Xamarin Programming Cohort playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos that I create, you can click my picture up in the top right and subscribe to the channel.